cool. Here we go. All right,
Awesome.
cool. So I'm here with Tricia Anderson. Tricia. I'm really excited to talk to you. I feel like we've done a couple of events together, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I know we
Absolutely.
like,
Writers and yeah.
yeah, we've met like in passing, but this is like our first chance to like sit down and get to talk a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, at events, I'm kind of a blur and yeah, kind of basic. So yeah, it's probably a good time to sit down and talk.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So, what have you been working on lately?
So right now I am working on the next book. I think it's the sixth book of the Gods of DC series.
Okay.
And then I am working on what I've been calling, and I realize that I do this all the time, that when I'm starting a new type of series or book, I call it the super secret project.
Oh,
And I was looking back in old notes and realized I've called another few books this, but I'm working on a super secret project I'm not really sharing with anybody.
okay.
Partially because I don't want to, I've tried starting this book and stop, and it hasn't ever really taken off.
Okay.
My other reason is while it's staying in the paranormal genre, it's exiting the romance genre. It's my first YA.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
So, how do we feel about that?
I wasn't sure. I was actually really worried about it. And then it's gonna sound really crazy. My daughter is a huge Rick Riordan fan. Like
Mhm.
anytime anything comes out of his camp, she is all over it. Like, and then she's 21. She'll be 21 in like 3 weeks. So I mean, we're not talking my 14 or my 12-year-old. We're talking my 21-year-old
Okay.
has written everything that guy has ever written. And one of our local community theaters did The Lightning Thief, which is based off Percy Jackson and the first Percy Jackson book. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
And I should know it. I'm reading it now. So we went to see it and I loved it. And the minute I got done, well, I got done. And of course, my first question was the play as good as the book? And she's like, well, it varied a few places, but I'm like, but I got done watching it and I was really interested and I wanted to start reading the book. And I started reading the book and I'm like, aha, found my niche. This is how we're going to do it from here.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
kind of using it kind of Percy Jackson as inspiration. But yeah, I just took an old book I was going to work on and I'm translating it or kind of pushing it in that direction. And I'm only about 1,500 words in,
Okay.
but it's flowing and I'm psyched.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I can see how excited you are about it. And I feel like that's like one of the best things about being a writer is that we get to be so passionate and so excited about our stories, and then other people are too.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's hilarious. If people start talking to me and start questioning stuff about my books, I will talk ad nauseum. Like, like I'm telling them everything. And it's hilarious because they're like, okay. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, I just bored you. And they're like, no, you didn't bore us. We're hearing your mind work in
Yeah.
that context. And it's crazy because you got this all planned out. And so
That's so cool. So, how many books have you written now?
I think I'm up to just in the novels. Now I have a pen name, Lynette Anderson, and under my pen name, I've written 5 picture books, I think.
Okay. Oh, cool.
But in just the novels, I've I think I'm in the realm of about 32 books.
Okay. Hey,
So I've
that's
got 33 and 34 in process.
okay. Awesome. That's fantastic. So, I hate when people ask me this question, but do you have a favorite story that you've written?
Yes. I used to be like, well, no, and it's kind of like the one I just wrote.
Yeah.
Um, Lately it's been Thistle Tattoo. And I think a lot of it is the first couple paragraphs were an excerpt that was in the Take Two anthology we wrote for Writers on the River for the fifth
Okay.
anniversary. And then I expounded on it, but I got to do a lot of character study. I
Okay.
got to do, because usually, this is gonna sound horrible, but usually with my books, or at least the last couple series, I go about a chapter in, if I even get that far. I've got one book, not gonna say which one,
Okay.
but I got one book that people read it, they got one chapter in and said, okay, didn't expect that. And basically it was bam, right to it.
Okay.
We did not waste time. Um, but I do have I had to slow heat it. because that's what I'm trying to say. Slow heated the whole thing. So I got to spend time on their characters.
Okay.
He's a military. He just came out of the army. He's got PTSD. In actuality, the thing begins with him in a hotel room about to take his own life. So I got to take from that utter depression to a complete turnaround, plus build a romance, plus add in other characters and yada yada. So yeah, so that one is just because I got to really do a character study.
Oh my goodness, that sounds really intense.
Plus, it's my best cover ever. I mean, that's the one people stop and go, wow. And I'm like, thank you.
I'm going to turn my camera off for a second. I'm sorry. I have something in my eye. So I'm like,
oh, no worries.
So what made you decide to want to write romance? Like, how did that come about?
As I kind of went, so the full story is, and I don't know if I've ever expounded on this very much. The full story is I've been writing it kind of since I was in middle school. I'm not gonna say grade school, middle school.
Cool. Yeah.
Me and my friend in middle school we would take notes and we would build stories together. And I would send it to her and she would send it to me and she'd do the basic background. And we never nothing we'd ever publish. It was just kind of like a mini teen soap opera type of thing. But it would be, she would build the backstory and build the characters, and then she'd send it to me, and somehow I ended up doing the romance. So I've pulled out stories I wrote when I was 13, 14. And they're romantic in some way.
That's cool.
But the current actual, publishing, I kind of had some ideas and I was kind of messing with a few stories, but it wasn't anything spectacular. And my mom handed me a copy of 50 Shades.
Okay.
And said, you know what? You should read this. It's really good, because it was when it was really popular. Yeah. And I read the first 7 chapters, threw it in a corner and said, I can do better, and wrote Black Irish.
Okay. So then you were ready.
Yep. Okay. And at that point, I had already self-published My Peculiar Princess, which is under my pen name. So I knew how to do it. And I just kind of threw together a cover and I put it on Amazon. I was like, okay, whatever. Tried to shop a couple small publishers. I sent it to Secret Cravings Publishing and they picked it up, which was astounding. And a lot of it at that point was okay, well, can you write a sequel?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm doing that. I'm writing. And then I ended up branching out and doing another series because I was so excited. I got signed that.
I love that.
Yeah. So I was so grateful. I was I have to write another story and I have to do something beneficial. And my daughter has cyclic vomiting syndrome. I'm oh, I should write about that. And then I had to find a job for the hero that wasn't, kind of looked down upon. He was a personal trainer. And next thing I know, I'm a member at an MMA gym because he's an MMA. He used to be an MMA fighter. So I'm going, well, I'll learn this way. And I'm doing kickboxing and MMA. It's been a wild ride.
That's so cool. I love that you did that.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of my books are fighter romances because I got the opportunity to train nearly everything you would train for a cage. So I have that knowledge. And as I've said, I have in my bio now, it says that I have done everything but got in the cage, and technically I fought in a cage. I was training someone. We were she was going to the world championships in jiu-jitsu and they were doing work outside and we had a cage at the time. And they're like, well, you need to go warm her up, or we need somebody to go warm her up. There's a guy and a woman, man and a woman. And I got looked at and he's like, yeah, you go in the cage and work with her. Cause I was there to work. I was there to do whatever construction we were doing. And they looked at me, pointed and said, nah, you're going to the cage with her to do jujitsu for a while. Well, I got out of doing construction. But when you're in there, you get to learn how to use the cage for your advantage. Not that I was getting beaten on really. So, but it was, there were a few times I got up against it where I had to put my feet up on it and push away. So I got to learn a lot about being in it, and I constructed 1, 2, or 3 times, but yeah, I walked people to the cage. As a team, we walked them. So as part of that, I've been in a locker room. I have done fight camps. I've done my own fight camp for a jiu-jitsu competition, which is miserable. Just it was a lot of eggs and fish. I can't eat fish anymore because I ate so much fish. It's not. Yeah, I mean, it's all this stuff that I was able to do, and it's great because I've got that inside knowledge. I understand what holds are, and I know what, if you do this, what will happen. And
Yeah. Well, and I think that knowledge is really important as a writer. Like I have one friend who is a baker, and she will not read stories where the main character is a baker because of all the little discrepancies. Like her big thing is a lot of times a character won't put on gloves before they
yeah,
start cooking. And so for her, she's like, I don't read stories about bakers like at all. So I love that you did that because it shows dedication to the character, dedication to the story, respect for your readers, and it lets people know that you're really taking it seriously.
I can't read MMA romance. I can't read
Really?
anybody of my own, because the first couple I read, in one in particular, the author was describing the fight. And I'm not going to get into it because in case anybody's ever read this author, they'll know who I'm talking about. But the author was using one terminology for a punch, one
Okay.
specific terminology for a punch. In jujitsu, that's that's not all punches. That's one specific type of punch.
Oh.
And so it literally sounded like they were fighting with one arm.
Oh, oh my goodness. Okay.
And I know that's not possible.
Yeah.
That's not, you don't do that. And I actually even brought it up to my coach, and I said what the passage said, and he just started laughing. He's like, no, you wouldn't win a fight like that. You would die, you
Oh,
know?
interesting.
So yeah. And so after I got done with that, I tried to pick up another one, and it was the same thing. It's just, you just start reading it and you're like, that wouldn't happen, So I mean, for a long time, I would run all my fight scenes by him and say, hey, am I correct? Is this and finally the point he says, I am confident enough in what you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just, and I would. And that's the thing. A lot of times what I do when I wrote a fight scene, I haven't run a fight scene for a while.
Yeah.
Because all my books kind of veered away from that. I mean, the Hollow Brothers are 7 MMA fighting werewolves. And so you would think that all of them, but in the background, there's a plot line about this evil power that all of these paranormal factions want.
Yeah.
And all of the pieces end up in the Hollows family somehow, whether human or object. They all end up in the Hollows family. So as the plot line is moving along, by the end book or last couple books, it's very hard to put them in a cage because the plot line is developing. And then it's kind of the same thing with Gods of DC. It's very hard to keep putting people in cages when that's not what the character does. So
Okay.
I haven't run one for a while, but a lot of times I would just turn on UFC and I'd find a fight I liked, and I would just kind of slow watch it and go, okay, well, I see that he transitioned from standing to, a takedown.
Mhm.
And being that my daughter is a collegiate wrestler, I know all about takedowns now.
Okay, cool.
So I would be able to walk through, okay, I need to take him down. So then I would shift to the wrestling mom mentality. Okay, how would they do that? And then shift back to the person who's been doing MMA, and then, okay, proceed on how they would do it with jujitsu. So yeah, that's how I kind of got to start writing those fights, was I would just kind of take pieces, MMA fights versus wrestling, and piece it all together, come up with something comprehensive that made sense, if I thought it out, usually abbreviate it because nobody wants to read 5 pages of MMA, and then end it.
Okay.
So yeah.
That is crazy cool. So is there anything that you want to learn next? Like a character brewing in your head, maybe a cook or a baker. Somebody that you're like, I want to learn how to do this and write about it.
And the crazy part is I've thought about it. I'm trying to think of what the next one was. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so I do actually have a third one in mind, and things changed, and I kind of have to back burner it for a little while, but I'm hoping not too long. And my day job is at a hospital, not in patient care. Nobody wants me to do that, but administrative.
Okay.
And my next one, the female is a paramedic.
Okay,
Well,
cool.
we don't get much experience with paramedics, even though some are, employed by our hospital. And that's kind of, I don't know if I jump in and say, oh, I'm going to be a paramedic next, but that's something I want to get background in and relatively like talk to paramedics, because I mean, I want to make sure I'm doing it right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm one to like, if I got a character who's doing something, I will jump in and try it to see if I mean, I will say I've got inspiration from, who was it? That would be Karen. Oh, so a lot of my inspiration, not a lot of my inspiration, but kind of pushing me in the right direction was Karen Marie Moning, who wrote the Fever series.
Okay.
And she did actually in an interview say that she had to learn how to shoot. So she took shooting lessons. She went to a firing range and she learned. And I thought that was so cool that you dedicate yourself to the point that you learned, and that was something an ability you had. And then I turned in and started with MMA. I'm like, oh, get it now. I understand. So yeah, I would say right now ambulance, but everything right now is very like right now I'm kind of concentrating on the gods of I'm concentrating on wrapping up the Hollow Brothers. For anybody who's listening and knows about the Hollow Brothers series, there is one more book. I'm doing the prequel. I'm going to be doing the book on Evelyn and Zane.
Okay.
So there's not really I can get from there. Plus, then I'm kind of working hard on the Gods of DC because I keep leaving everybody in a cliffhanger, and that's a lot of Greek mythology, but that isn't much more. So I don't really have one specifically other than this one with the ambulance.
Okay.
That I can throw myself into, but yes, if one ever comes up, I have to learn something, I will be in there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, and I feel like however you learn about that, you're going to have a really good time and learn so many interesting things that can bring your character to life.
Oh yeah. 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 I love writing about the gods just because you learn things that you did not know before.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff is just bizarre. You start to put two and two together, and you're like, so and so actually dated their niece, or I mean the story of Hades and Persephone. Or their daughter or something. Like, okay, how do I spin this in a romance that doesn't look incestual?
Yeah.
I don't use a whole lot of uncle and niece in my Gods of DC series, so people can't put that together. I mean, they are, but they're not.
So what do you think the coolest thing about being a writer is?
I just like sharing the thoughts in my head and all these stories I come up with everybody else. That's probably just being able to share that. That's probably the coolest thing, I think. I do love meeting people, but I'm also kind of an introvert. So days up to a signing, I'm usually a basket case. I'm like psyching myself up. I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to, and I will that morning. And my poor husband can attest to this, run around and just be like, and freaking out. And he's like, calm down. But he knows part of it is just that I'm trying to bring myself out so that when I get to the signing, I'm calm. Okay. And I can talk to people. But yeah, I have a tendency to stumble over my words, and my mouth goes faster than my brain.
Well, that's totally fair, because I mean, I love book events too, but it's definitely a lot. There's a lot of chaos and a lot of stuff to remember in the days leading up to an event, especially if you travel. This summer I went to an event and I showed up and I did not have a pen, which is pretty important at a book
Exactly,
signing. Yeah. Luckily, another author helped me out, which was great. But yeah, like, who does that?
Yeah. I've done the same thing. My second event that I went to, Romance Rendezvous, this year, and we drive an hour. That's one of the beauties I love about that event is I get up in the morning, everybody's like, where are you staying? Like, I'm coming in that morning.
Yeah.
How far do you have to drive? An hour. I live an hour away from it. Not hard, up an interstate, a little bit off, whatever. That morning, I'm running around the house. Everything's together, just putting things in the car. My husband's packing the car. He looks at me and goes, you ready? Yes. Do you have everything? I glance around the house. Yes. Okay, let's go. Drive to Cedar Falls. We start pulling things out of the car, and I freeze. And we are talking It's an hour before the doors open. So
Yeah.
there is no possible way I can turn around, or my husband can turn around and drive home and drive back. Nor is it possible for me to call my children and say, hey, can you come up here? I'm banner,
Oh,
my table runner with my name on it.
yeah.
What else I forget? I think those two things. Oh, and the rack that my books go in.
Oh no.
30 books, no rack.
Oh my
Plus I
God.
have a giveaway. I was selling some embroidered bags that I had done. I always have candy on my table. I now have to make room for 30 books, because 30 individual books with 2 or 3 per book. I about lost it in the parking lot.
Oh, oh my
I
goodness.
was like, I can't do this.
No
I can't
idea.
do this. And he's like, I'm like, and then finally he's like, well, I mean, what? And I just got that, gonna make it work. And I just took off for the hotel, walked in, it actually, I think I probably did better than I possibly would have with the rack, because everybody could see everything. So we got
Oh,
done, and he's like, maybe we don't bring the rack anymore.
funny. Okay.
I'm like, well, there's no table space, but it worked. But yeah.
As long as it worked out, and I never would have guessed, like just from like casually seeing you, it looked like you were having a great time and totally holding it together.
Yeah,
Totally.
I left the belt down for the parking lot.
Oh my goodness. You poor
I was
thing.
like, and I kept chasing Polly and going, left my stuff at home. She's like, it's okay. It's okay.
I love Polly. I'm not just
I love
saying that
her.
because I think she'll watch this later.
Yeah. Hi, Polly.
She
No, she
she's the
kept talking
best.
me down. She's like, no, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I love about that and Riders on the River. I feel like the
Yeah.
organizers just are so balanced.
Oh, yeah.
And just if there's anything that we're worried about, they're like, we will help you.
Yeah.
We can kind of guide you through whatever the problem is and find a solution, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, and especially considering how many different personalities they're dealing with that day. I mean, if you think of writers, there's like what, 90
There's
different
a lot.
authors. And I know we're all different. And yeah, they're so easily handled when there's a crisis, about handling it and taking care of it and making sure everybody's okay. And yeah. And I mean, I'm pretty sure it got to be 2 or 3 times I've done the same thing. Maybe not left something vital at home, but done 2 or 3 things, did something at writers where I ended up over at the organizers going, I forgot, or I did this,
Oh
and something I
no.
screwed up at. And they do the same thing. It's like, it's okay.
I love
It'll be
that.
fine. So
That's
yeah.
really cool. So, what's your favorite thing about book events? I know they can be a little chaotic. Do you have like something that you really look forward to when you're going to an event?
If you would ask me a couple years ago, I would just have kind of said, oh, just meeting people. It's seeing the people. It's 2 things. It's, first of all, seeing the readers that I know, that I haven't seen forever. And
Yeah.
I get to see them. And it's also the authors. There are a ton of authors. And I've got some that I'm super close friends with. That's the only time that I get to see them, is at book events. And it's just hugs and talking and catching up on things that we've not gotten to catch up on. And our families, well, primarily husbands, I'll say husbands, are off talking because they know each other, or they're talking as a group. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say primarily just getting together with people I haven't seen in a long time. And that, they're good friends. And I just, yeah.
I
I mean,
love that too.
if it tells you bad enough, one person I'm always getting to catch up with is Dakota Trace.
Oh my gosh, I love Dakota. She's so cool. Yeah.
Dakota and I live in the same town.
Do you really?
We live in the same town,
Oh,
and we
that's
don't see
funny.
each other. She's always constantly like, or she was. I know that right now she's got something that's keeping her super busy, and she hasn't had the time. But she would literally message me and go, "Do you want to go to the coffee shop and write?" And I'm like, "I don't have time for that."
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, I
your writer's
chase the
really
kids.
busy. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't have time, and so we end up catching up at book events.
Hey, cool though. That's, you know what though? I feel like book events are great for that. It reminds me of camp. Like,
Yes,
remember when you were a kid and like you'd look forward to camp all year and like the buddies that you would get to see?
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
so I know what you like about your books. I know what you're learning. I know what you like about book events. What advice would you give to new writers or somebody who's never published a book before?
Um, don't give up. It is so easy. I mean, even now, I'm 30 books in, and there are days I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's
Okay.
just too hard. It always comes out in the end. It's when you start off new. I know this is a hurdle I had, and I know it's a hurdle a lot of people have. You get this book, and everybody, you want the world to know. And then you find out how hard it is to let the world know, because suddenly you are now the person with a book and it doesn't sell itself. So now you have to sell the book. And it can be a challenge, but just you have to keep going at it. And eventually, you will find that those readers, you will find opportunities to be able to be in the public and share that book with them. You will hopefully you'll get the inspiration to write a second one and a third one, which
Yeah.
that was the one piece of advice I have always heard. If you really want to be successful as an author, and you have to write, because the more books you have on the more market, the more likely somebody is going to pick them up and read them. So never give up. Just keep going. If this is something you really want, you got to keep chasing it.
Yeah. I love that. That's great advice. And
Yeah.
I think it's something a lot of people need to hear too. I often think that being a writer can be kind of lonely.
It is.
That's a
Yeah.
shocker to everybody watching and you.
Yep.
It can be a little lonely and feel isolating sometimes. So I think having someone say, it's totally fine, don't give up, keep going is great advice.
Yeah. And it can be a challenge too, because you're seeing everybody else and they're super successful, and their books on the New York Times bestsellers list or what have you. And you're like, okay, why not me? Why
Yeah.
not? Well, it's just not your time yet. Somebody who's just got a story and they want to write it, and now you're sitting there with a manuscript and you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Um, that can be daunting, and that can make people give up. And it's like, no, start researching those avenues. It doesn't have to be traditionally published. You may take years before you're traditionally published. You may never want to be traditionally published.
Yeah.
I had 3 small publishers all close their doors.
Oh, wow.
There are times that you're just like, no. I mean, you can do it on your own. There's always an avenue. You
Yeah.
just got to keep pushing and keep trying to find it, and until you get to where you want to be.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. So, as we're wrapping up tonight, is there anything else that you would like to say to readers about your story? I know that your tagline is hard-hitting romance.
Yes, that might be changing. I might be rebranding. If the super secret project works out, I'll probably be rebranding.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess the only thing I'd have to say is, give one a try. I'll be honest, I have a free read on my website.
Okay.
I do know I have to reformat it, because I had originally had it on the website and had to scroll on my website. Now I have an option where you can download it.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I mean, if you ever just want to try, I have a free read on my website.
Okay.
Other than that, I love you all. I love every reader who says when I have a reader come up and say, oh, I loved yada yada. I get caught between wanting to crawl under my table and die of happiness.
Yeah.
Seriously, because it's like caught in between, because I'm just so shocked. I'm so happy when people tell me, oh, I love this book. And I'm like, okay.
I
Thank
love
you.
that. That's amazing.
Primarily because I don't ever see myself as that. I never see myself as the successful author. I'm just me. And when somebody's like, oh, I read your book and I loved it, it's like, you did?
Oh, I love that. That's so sweet. That's really wholesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, Tricia, it was awesome to get to talk to you. Thank you
Yes,
so
thank
much
you.
for hanging tight with me over our Facebook troubles. I really appreciate your patience, and this was just so much fun. I hope we get to do it again soon.
I hope so too. Yeah. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This has been fun.
Of course, yeah.
Technology, gotta love it.
Yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, have a wonderful night, and hopefully we will talk again soon, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Bye.
Bye.